Do you want to feel happier? Do you want to feel more radiant and more alive? Or to go beyond alive and truly feel like you are thriving? That's what I'm here for. Helping you find that best you that you know is in there. It is. And you can start accessing that you today. It's possible. If you're ready for a shortcut to just that, let's work together. Reach out and let's work one-on-one to transform you and your life into happy, into thriving. Reach out to me and book a quick call. It's in the show notes, and let's get you there. Are you really committed and ready? Then let's do it. Personally, I'm the happiest I've ever been thanks to all the practices that I've made a part of my life. You can be too. It is here for you, I promise. You can also access my course, The Youthfulness Hack, which is all about feeling good and getting radiant and all the things I do concentrated in one spot. Go there today and use code AMY15 for 15% off right now, only for listeners of this show. And if you are truly ready to have accountability and live happy, book a call with me today. The world needs your best. You deserve your best. Hello and welcome to the Amy Edwards Show. I'm your host, Amy Edwards, and here we are again. We're talking money again this week, which has been money on my mind. I am so excited to talk with our expert, Paige Pritchard, today. First, up top, I just want to say a huge thank you for you being here. It means so much to me. And you know, if you ever want to share something, I say share it with a friend, but also if you can rate and review, all those things help the podcast grow and people reach out to me, just like today's guest, which I'm so excited to feature her. Like, it's just so cool when something lands in my inbox and I get to just go, this is badass. So that's what we're doing today. And I just want to say thank you to you. Also, you know, the course is out. There is an exclusive discount that I mentioned at the top of the episode for you if you are interested in the Youthfulness Hack course, or try out the free one, the Ageless Mindset. It's all about mindset. And I mean, so much of life is about mindset, and that's what we're going to get into today when we talk about overspending. So join me in welcoming Paige Pritchard, our not overspending coach. Spending coach.
Either or. Honestly, either or. People call me both, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Well, I know overspending is kind of your wheelhouse,
yes.
And it's a spending coach because you know what? If you're already, I just mentioned mindset too. So welcome.
Thank
first
you.
of all, thank
Thanks.
you for coming
I'm so
in person.
happy to be here.
I'm so
honored.
excited that you're here.
Yeah.
And, I think that, you know, when we're automatically saying overspending, then we're putting out those words. We're putting out that mindset already. So can we just say spending rather than that, right?
Yeah, spending coach.
I love
that.
It. I do too. And, you know, that's what struck me so much too about how much of this is mindset, because I think that I have it ingrained in me that I am an overspender. Mm-hmm. And if I go look at the facts right now, I'm not.
Yeah.
And yet I feel like I'm like either a burden or a burden on my own budget or something like that. So can we start with something around mindset there?
Yeah, of course. It's the place that I always like to start. And I will say with spending.
Well, fabulous.
I know, right? You just teed me up right there so perfectly.
We didn't even plan
that. So I mean, it's like with money, kind of like let's start at 30,000 feet and then we'll work our way down like into the mindset piece.
Great.
But I think with spending is the one facet of money that so often we aren't taught how to do it. We just think like, oh, we just spend it, or it's like the one part that we ingrain into our personality. So like you said, and I hear this all the time from the women in my community and that I coach, they're like, but you don't understand, like, I'm a shopper. Or I hear this so often with like people in relationships, like I'm the shopper, he's the saver. I'm the spender, he's the saver.
Just label.
And it's something that becomes ingrained in our identity and like who we are. And it's something that I actually call your spending self-concept, which is essentially like how you think about yourself in relation to money, building wealth, and specifically spending money, right?
Oh, dude, totally.
And so, you know, it's like we get into our head and we assume this identity of I'm somebody who shops a lot. I'm somebody who overspends. Like I'm just a shopper. I love to spend. And I always say, whatever your spending self-concept is, that's essentially like what you're going to live into, right? That's just how our brains are like designed and programmed to work.
You
right?
could apply that to just about anything.
Just about anything.
Yeah.
Anything that becomes a part of your identity, your brain is going to want to live into that and perpetuate, right? And the same goes for money and specifically spending. Like spending is the one area of money where we're like, this is who I am. And I always say, listen, like spending isn't who you are. It's just something that you do, right?
Like,
Spending,
like cooking or something?
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Like it's the same thing of like learning how to cook or learning how to ride a bike. Like one of my big messages is that spending is a skill. Spending isn't your personality. It's a skill. Like it's something that you can get better at. It's something that you can refine. It's something that you can massage. And the mindset piece is so huge in that, because when you are rooted in that mindset of I'm just somebody who shops, it becomes who you are. And so it becomes something that you will never work to improve, because you almost get into this mindset of like, well, this is just who I am. Like, why try? Why try to get better at this? Why try to become a more aligned and more purposeful spender? It's just who I am. Right?
Yeah, yeah. And I just had a thought while you were saying that. And one year, I think it was like 2015, 12, 15, I don't know. I didn't buy anything extraneous for a whole year.
Oh, you did a no-buy year.
I did a no-buy year.
Love it.
And because I thought I need to break my own patterns or whatever.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of just a thought occurred to me as you were saying that, like, was that the healthiest thing to do for me? I don't know. Maybe I was still labeling myself like as a problem.
Yes. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So I love that. First of all, I didn't know that you had done a no-buy year.
I didn't tell you on purpose.
Yeah.
I wanted to spring it on you.
Yeah. So I have like mixed thoughts on no-buy years because I think.
I do too now.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. Because I think that there's a way that you can do them well to where they're actually beneficial to you. But I think that the way that a lot of people do them and that you see a lot of people doing them on social media actually cause more harm than good.
Like what?
Well, because I think when a lot of people do a no-buy year, first of all, the first reason that they're doing it is because they think that there's something inherently wrong with them that needs to be fixed and needs to be corrected.
I thought I was like too much.
Yeah.
But that's still in me. I'm projecting it onto my boyfriend now and saying like, you think I'm an overspender. You think I'm too much. You think, you know?
Yeah. So that typically tends to be like the catalyst of it is like, there's something wrong with me that I need to like correct or that I need to rein in or that sort of thing. And the second thing that I think a lot of people do that make no buys not very constructive is that the entire time that they're doing it, they're still focused on the lack and the deprivation and what they don't have and what they're missing out on. Right. And to me, I'm like, listen, if you're going to do a no buy, my like one rule for a no buy is like the purpose of a no buy should be to bring back like your focus and your attention into what you already have, like the beauty and the richness and the deepness into the resources that you already have in your life, right? Like, let's just take clothes for an example. I have a lot of clients who were like, okay, I'm done. I'm not going to buy any more clothes, right? Like I'm done buying clothes. And I'm like, okay. But I'm like, listen, if the entire time you do this, you're still going to your favorite websites every day and you're still, you know, like making your Pinterest, like you're still constantly focused on like, oh my God, but there's this and there's this and there's this and there's this that I want and I can't have.
Right. I'm going to make a list of what I want when this is done.
Versus like, okay, I'm really going to take this time to like rediscover like what's in my closet? Like, what do I have? Like, I think clothes are just such a good example, especially with women.
Me.
It's
I used to own a clothing store, Paige.
Okay. Yeah.
So I bought everything.
Right. So it's like, it's not true for all women. Like, I don't want to make this generalization, but for a lot of us, it's like, how much stuff do we have in our closets that's like stuffed to the back or still has the tags on that we bought it for a reason. Like when we bought it, there was something in us that said like, I like this, or this feels like me, but yet we've worn it once or maybe not at all. And so it's like taking that no buy time to really like rediscover like the beauty of what you currently have. Right. Like getting yourself to that space of sufficiency. And I call it getting out of like the wanting just to want things mindset. Yeah. And that's what a lot of us get into is like, we just get into these mindsets of like, I don't even know what it is. And to be honest, it doesn't even matter what it is. I just want something, right? Like, do you ever get into those states where you're like, I don't even care what it is. I just feel like going out and spending money. It could be anything.
Yeah.
I just want to go out and buy something. It's just like that. I call it like you want to want things, right?
Right.
And it's getting yourself out of just that, almost like that addiction to just like, gimme, 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 gimme. Like more.
I think it is an addiction because you're not paying attention to the root
Totally.
of it.
Yeah.
I had another thought. You know what? That year did have a positive impact on me because I'm reflecting on it a little bit. I remember like now when I do go to buy something, it pulled me back into like, make it a hell yes.
Yes.
Rather than like, if I'm wishy-washy at all on something, I don't buy it. Cause then I'm like, it will just sit there with tags on. Like I'm buying just to buy.
Yes.
Rather than like, Yes. This is an absolute, I love this. It's going to be a great addition to my wardrobe. I'm using clothing again, but yes.
Right. Yeah. And to me, that's the big difference. And, I always say to my clients, I'm like, when you're buying something, really focus on like the moment that you're trying to make that purchase decision and really kind of tap into like, what am I more focused on in this moment? Because I say that when you're more focused on the product that you're buying, that's when you know that you're on the right track. And that's when you know that you're doing it right, versus a very big difference is it's like when you're in that moment and you're simply just like trying to get that dopamine hit. Or you see this with sales a lot, like when like we're more focused on the deal or the promotion or like what we're saving, right? Like, oh my God, this is such a good deal, right? It's like you could be buying a sack of potatoes. It's like, it doesn't matter. It's like if it's on sale and if it's a good deal, our brains want to be like, better get it, better buy it. It's on sale, even though it's a sack of potatoes. And
I mean,
you're like,
Justin just did that because like we were trying to, really delve into money and watch it. And we were in HEB the other day and I was like, oh, this is like some sort of special watermelon knife and it's on sale. And he was like, we should get it.
Yeah.
And I go, no, we don't even need to spend the $2 on that. And he goes, but it's $2 off. And I was like, no. And like, we had this sort of thing where I was like, this is the exact mindset we're trying to break.
Okay. So can I talk about that for a little bit? Because
Yes,
that's really
please.
big. So that's what I call being in your sale brain. So when you're in your sale brain is not a logical brain.
We have a separate sale brain?
Yeah. So I call it like your normal brain and your sale brain, right? So in sales, this is like, they're literally designed to do this for us. And that's why, if you're listening to this, like some people tell me like, when I see a sale, it's almost like I can't help myself. I say like, you're a sucker for a sale, right? It's like, you just feel like this like pull towards it. It's like, you can't even help yourself. And I'm like, that's because you've gone into your sale brain. And when you're in your sale brain, there's 3 things going on all at the same time. The first thing that's going on is you get that dopamine hit. You get that high, that rush.
This is exciting.
You're like, right?
Something
like,
is
oh my
happening.
God, sale. That's the first thing. The second thing is you go into competitive mode, which is almost where you feel like you're winning. Like you're winning up on the retailer. You're winning up on other consumers who have to pay more than you, right? It almost feels like a game. And that's why a lot of people, like bargain hunters, that's why they call it. It feels like a hunt. It feels like a competition, right? Like you're trying to win something. So that's going on. And then the third thing, which is the most powerful thing that we don't typically notice, but it's kind of like the underlying thing, is your brain goes into loss aversion mode, which is our aversion to loss. And our brains hate losing things. And especially our brains hate losing money. And so with the sale, it's like, it's not like you're losing money, but you're losing out on the opportunity to save money if you don't buy it.
Totally
and
makes
so
sense.
To your point, when Justin was like, but it's $2 off, right? So that was his brain going into loss aversion mode.
Right.
Because he's like, but if we don't buy it, like we could save this $2.
Yeah.
And so I always say, what are you more focused on? Are you focused on what you're buying? And are you more focused on what you're actually spending? Or are you focused on what you're saving? Because if you're focused on what you're saving, you're in your sale brain.
Yeah.
Like, oh, we're saving $2.
Like I was focused on,
but you were focused
we have a
on,
perfectly good
we're
knife
about
at
to
home.
buy a watermelon chopper for $2 that we don't really need, right? So like,
and I cut up the watermelons.
Yeah, exactly.
Like really?
Exactly. So like your sale brain, it's crazy. We do some really crazy things and we make some really like illogical decisions when we're in our sale brain because it's just all of these things are happening all at once. And it's not a very logical place to be.
So when we're in that moment, are we breaking a cycle, like just even with a $2 item? You know, like
absolutely.
Every time you do it matters, right?
It doesn't matter. And this is what I say a lot. I'm like, to your point, it doesn't matter if you're buying a $2 watermelon cutter or if you're buying a $1,500 designer handbag. It's like the principles can still be the same. Now, the stakes are probably going to be a little higher with the designer handbag, but it's not even about the money, or it's not even about the amount. It's about the principle of it, the behavior of it, like teaching yourself that behavior of, I'm going to be more focused on what I'm buying and what I'm spending versus what I'm saving, right?
There's so much psychology behind this.
So much.
I think that this component of, you said you checked out those other episodes about manifesting money. I think this component is crucial because sometimes when I'm about to spend something, I have a minor panic attack. Like I have emotions attached around it, and I haven't learned to shift those yet.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, oh my God, I have to pay for this X now, And I'm not even talking about clothes. I'm just talking about spending in general, like on whatever need has arisen in that moment, whether it's my kids or whatever.
Right. So
it seems like there's like this other mindset shift that you've really got to make the leap on.
Yeah. Well, and for me, like I'm really big on like spending your money guilt-free, because I always say like,
that's what that's what I'm kind of talking about too. Maybe not guilt or fear, any negative.
Yeah. Guilt, fear, anxiety, something along those lines, right?
Whatever is
like,
I'm
going to spend this money and then something bad is going to happen. Right.
I'm going to suffer consequences of some sort.
Yeah.
Whether it's I can't pay the next bill or whatever it is.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. No, exactly. And so I'm really big on like guilt-free spending. And I think it's like, for anyone who has experienced this, a good place to start is if you feel a lot of anxiety or if you feel a lot of overwhelm when you're spending money, I think tapping into like, okay, why am I feeling the fear and anxiety? Like taking it a step further and saying like, what am I afraid is going to happen? Like just taking it that one step further can give you a lot of insight into what am I afraid is going to happen if I buy this thing? Is it to your point, like, well, if I do this, I'm not going to be able to afford X down the road, or like taking it that one step further to say like, what am I really afraid is going to happen? But what I teach is like a money management system, right? So I kind of blend like the mindset with the how-tos. It's like, I'm going to teach you the mindset stuff, but I'm also going to help you like get down into the numbers and the nitty-gritty.
That's what I do here. This is great. Perfect.
And so I'm really big on creating a plan for your money to where you have a set pool of money that I just call like your fun money. I call it like your money loves, the things that you love to spend money on, that you just get to spend that money guilt-free. Because I think the biggest thing is you've planned it out and you've made that decision ahead of time, right? Like you've made that decision ahead of time to say, I know that I'm going to go spend $50 on this thing for my daughter, or I know that I'm going to go spend $1,500 on this handbag, right? If like a lot of the stress and the anxiety that we have around money comes from like when we're just making decisions, like boom, 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 when we're making those impulse choices, when there's no deliberate like planning, when there's no deliberate thought behind it, and we're just like, okay, yeah, I'm going to go do this like willy-nilly. That's when a lot of like the buyer's remorse and the spending shame comes in after the fact, because we know that we've just made a decision like off the cuff that we're like, well, now I'm going to have to figure this out. And that's the mindset that a lot of my clients come to me, and I call it the screw it mindset, where they're just like, screw it, I'm just going to spend this money and I'm going to figure out how to deal with this later. Like, I'm going to do what I want. I'm going to spend what I want, and I'll figure out how to deal with this later, right? And so when you're in that mindset, you are making a lot of choices that are then going to create a lot of stress and anxiety for you, because you're going to do it. And then after the fact, you're going to be like, what did I just do? What have I done? How am I going to pay for this? Or now I can't pay for, my kids' summer camp that I know they're going to have to go to, right? Because I just spent this money over here. So
is there sort of a shorter and a bigger strategy around that? The bigger meaning you would plan out what you're going to spend, like you said, that fun money set aside, and the smaller being maybe in those moments of spending. I'm reading this book called The 1 Minute Millionaire. Have you read it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It was like on the little give a book, take a book, birdhouse looking library down the street. And anyway, one of the things that they recommend is with every purchase, you just take a pause there to feel that gratitude. And like, that's been interesting because I don't do that for every purchase. And so
Yeah.
that would be the smaller version.
Yeah.
Are those
okay.
things that you...
So I'm going to give you like 3 things that we can kind of like tie in here. They kind of like all come together, right?
Okay, cool.
Okay. So the first thing is that I always like to tell people is really spend some time and think about the answer to this question, which is, what do I love to spend money on? Most of us can't really answer that question. And I don't mean love.
Sitting here like,
And I don't mean, and I'll say this, I don't mean love in the sense of it gives you that like false high, quick dopamine hit, right? I mean, it feels good when you're doing it, and it still feels good a week from now, a month from now, a year from now. It's those purchases that you look back on, like every time you see it in your house or your closet, or maybe it was an experience, or maybe it's a service that somebody provides to you. But every time you do it and every time you see it or experience it, you're like, I'm so happy that I spent my money on that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I would still choose to have that item than I would choose to have my money back. And a lot of us really can't answer that question in terms of like, what do I truly love to spend money on? For me, a couple of years ago, like when I was in my younger 20s, I would have told you clothes, because that's what I thought was almost kind of like expected of me, like as like a girl in my 20s in the corporate world. Like I would have told you, oh, I'd love to spend money on clothes and designer handbags and things like that. And that's what I was spending a lot of my money on. But those weren't really things that like truly brought me happiness and truly brought me joy. I was spending money on those things because like that's what I thought that I should spend money on, right? So now I know, and I've done this work, and I realize that for me, the 2 big things for me are, one is convenience. So I love buying back my time, and I love buying convenience for myself. So
Ooh,
I
good answer. I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, I will spend a lot of money and pay a lot of people to do services for me where they're more efficient at doing that thing than I am, right? So it's like I pay someone to clean my pool. Could I learn how to clean my pool? Like, yeah, I'm sure.
No.
But it's like, I'm not going to do that. Like clean my pool, do all my yard stuff, clean my house, do my dry cleaning, do my grocery shopping for me. Like if there's something that I can pay someone else to do so that it's going to make my life more convenient and it's going to save me time so that I can direct my time elsewhere, I'm like, take my money all day long.
Totally.
That's one for me. And personal development is another big one for me. Books, coaching, mentorship, things like that. That's where I really like to spend and direct my money. So that's the first part, is like figuring out, I call them your money loves, right? But it could be, maybe for you, it's travel. Maybe for you, it's, luxury. Like you really like spending money on really like luxurious experiences, like a really nice spa day or having a really nice like dining experience. Clothes is one. And I just want to say too that like maybe clothes is yours, right? Like I know a lot of women who clothing is their money love. Like it's not for me, but it is for them. Like their closet and their clothes.
Yeah, fashion, we'll call it.
Fashion. It's, it's like a work of art to them, right? Like
sure, it is. It's expression.
So, clothing could be one as well, but like really thinking about, what do I love to spend money on, and the things that I spend money on that truly inject the highest level of value into my life, and being really conscious of like, am I spending my money in this way? Now, does that mean like everything you're going to spend is going to fall into one of those categories? Like, no, obviously not. But it makes it easier to like make those decisions in the moment. Like for me, of if I have a certain amount of money that I have to spend like guilt-free every month, like where do I want that to go? Do I want it to go to clothes, or do I want it to go to over here? It's like making that decision and knowing where that money is going to go. It makes that decision so much easier for me, right?
I love it.
Yeah. So that's one. The second one is just making a plan for your money. Like I call it your money machine. And a lot of people think that this has to be like overly complicated and have all these steps and all of this sort of thing. I'm really big on automation. I'm like 90% of your money can be automated. And I check in with my money. I'm not saying everyone has to do this. I do this because I like to, and it brings me joy. But I check in with my money every day for like 60 seconds.
Okay.
It's just become part of my routine, right? Like,
what do you mean when you say you check in with your money?
Yeah. So like before I start my day and I sit down at my desk to work, I use a budgeting software called YNAB. I pull up YNAB and I just take a quick peek at my money, YNAB automatically pulls in like my transactions for me from like credit cards and stuff like that. It takes me 30 seconds to, I hit a couple buttons and I confirm, because like YNAB will say like, oh, you went to Kroger. Was this groceries? And I'll be like, yep, confirm.
Cool.
Yeah. So that takes me about 30.
Can you do this on your phone?
You can do it on your phone.
Okay.
I usually do it on my desktop just because that's just how it works into my routine. But I mean, maybe 60 seconds to 90 seconds, right? It doesn't take long. On the days that I'm paid, maybe it's a little bit more, maybe 10 minutes just to kind of allocate that money. But I'm really big on creating a money machine. And, I always say managing your money in a way so that you're paying yourself first. I'm really big on like taking care of like future you. So like taking care of future Amy and making sure that she's taken care of. And what I mean by that is, do I have enough money to pay my needs and my necessities? That's first question we got to ask. Do I have enough money to meet my debt obligations, right? If you have credit card payments, a car payment, a student loan payment, do I have the money to pay that? And then I'm really big on, I think everyone should always have at least one financial goal that they're working towards at some point in time. Maybe you're trying to get out of credit card debt. Maybe you're trying to build up an emergency fund or a down payment for a house. It's getting really clear on what's the goal that I'm working towards and what is required of me, either on a monthly basis or a per paycheck basis, of what needs to go towards that goal.
Totally.
Right?
What this does too is it exemplifies a consciousness around it.
Yes,
It's
totally.
one thing to say our affirmations or questions or whatever I've been talking about with other guests, but it's another to make it part of your daily routine where you're conscious about it in a way that's not sending you into a spiral. Instead, you just do it every day. It's a thing you do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think a lot of people teach, like, you don't have to check it, like you don't have to check in with your money every day. That's too much. It's too cumbersome, things like that. And I'm like, listen, maybe you don't do it every day because that's not like for you. And I totally get that, right? Like I
don't think it's for everyone, but
no,
you seem to have a brain that functions kind of like mine.
Yeah.
Are you a Virgo? I don't know.
No, I'm a Leo.
Oh, I'm on the cusp of Leo Virgo.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. But to me, I'm like, listen, just being in the presence of your money and almost just giving it that care and attention. And
just like you do anything else.
Just like you do anything else. And it doesn't need much. It doesn't need much.
Well, that's what you're saying, 60 to 90 seconds. I'm like, I can 100. I actually kind of already do that though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's just like, it's going in there super quick. It's just having a pulse on things. And where we get it messed up in our mindset is we think that we're like, I'm so overwhelmed. Like I can't check in with my money because I'm so overwhelmed, because it's like, I'm scared of what I'm going to see, or I'm scared of what's going to be in there. I don't want to face the reality of my situation. So then we go into complete overwhelm and complete avoidance mode. We don't look at our money at all. But then the irony of that is that it just ends up creating more problems for us because we have no idea what's going on. Yeah. And it just gets worse and worse and worse. Like the longer you wait and the more time that goes in between you and checking in with your money. And I just find like, look, like I just like to have like a quick little pulse on like what's happening, what's going on. And just doing that gives me so much like peace and confidence. And so I'm like, you have your plan. It's all automated. You send money where it needs to go, like automate all your bills, automate all your debt payments, even the money that you're putting towards a financial goal. I'm like, automate it. Mm-hmm. Like if you want to build up, let's just say you want to build up a $6,000 emergency fund in a year. That's $500 a month. I'm like, automate it. On the day that you get paid, literally set up an automatic transfer so that on payday, like money goes in and then $500 goes to like where it needs to be. And then after that, I'm like, okay, after that, you're good. You're covering your needs, you're meeting your obligations, you're funding a financial goal, and whatever is left over, I'm like, that's your guilt-free money. That's your, where do I want to spend this guilt-free, send it towards your money loves. And to your point, when you're going and spending, you don't have to have this almost like panic attack of like, oh my gosh, like, should I be doing this? Should I be spending this? Should I be buying this? Like,
yeah, all
of that mental chatter just gets taken out of the equation.
Not only that, do you think there's something in your subconscious that's like, oh, I'm going to have to check in with this in the morning. So you're a little bit like, I'm going to see this again.
Yeah, no,
because it's your habit.
No, totally. And it makes you like, it just makes you a little bit more conscious of it. And I'll say one more tip, like you kind of mentioned this of just like putting a beat or putting a pulse in between like you and your purchases. I'm really big on that because, again, going back to like your sale brain, anytime that we start to think about shopping or buying something, dopamine already starts to get released in the brain. Right?
Does it really?
Yeah. And that's why they call
Wow.
dopamine the anticipation molecule.
Yeah.
Because it gets released.
That's what we like.
Yeah. And
like
it's
that
like
part.
it gets released in the anticipation. So you even think about going to Target and just like browsing the home decor section, your brain is already like, ooh, like that dopamine starts to like pour into your brain, right? And so, you know, again, I'm like, when your brain is in that state, you're not going to make logical decisions. And so giving your brain time to cool off. So one of my favorite tools that I teach people is I call it your things I want to buy list. And people are like, oh, like an Amazon wish list. And I'm like, kind of, but even take it a step further than that. Like, don't just have it be one place on Amazon. Have you ever heard of Notion? It's like it's kind of like an Asana. It's kind of like a list, kind of like you can organize your life in it or whatever.
Okay.
I have a board in Notion that's called Things I Want to Buy. And whenever I see anything that I'm like, ooh, if I'm on Instagram and an ad comes up and I'm like, ooh, that's cute or whatever, right? If I'm in Target and I see something, I'll take a picture of it or I'll take a screenshot of it and I will add it to my Things I Want to Buy list. And when you do that, you're still actually giving yourself a hit of dopamine. Because when you're adding it to your list, it's like you're getting to kind of relish in that anticipation of like, I'm not going to buy this right now, but maybe I'll buy it next month or maybe I'll buy it a couple weeks from now. And so it's like you're adding it to your things I want to buy list. You still get that hit of dopamine. But I would say like half the stuff that goes on my things I want to buy list, I never end up getting.
Right.
Because when I come back to it, I'm like, yeah, no.
No, it's like putting things in your cart.
Yeah. And it gives your brain time to cool off. That's the biggest thing about it is it's like getting yourself out of this cycle of like, see it, want it, buy it, see it, want it, buy it. That's the cycle that so many of us are in, especially now with like ads and social media. Every day we're bombarded with like tons of things that we could want and desire and have. And so many of us have just gotten into this pattern of see it, want it, buy it. And it's practicing that behavior habit of like, see it, want it, pause. And it's telling your brain, like we can still buy this thing. Like I can buy this like a week from now if I still want it, but we're just going to like give ourselves a little bit of time to like make sure that this is good and aligned and we still want it a week from now. And if we do, we'll go back and buy it. And so usually that calms my brain down enough to where it's like, okay.
I'm doing that. I'm on that train.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I know. I'm really proud of that actually.
Yeah, no, you should be. It's much harder said than done. Right. But it is a really like it, you know, it's the first tool I always tell people to start, you know, everyone who's just like, just give me something easy that I can start doing.
Yeah.
I'm like, start a things I want to buy list.
Well, you have an assessment of how to know if you have a shopping problem.
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah. So I would say like the biggest indicator, you know, if you're a compulsive shopper is really if you're using shopping to change your emotional state. Most compulsive shoppers typically shop when they're feeling bad. So the first thing I'll tell people is really tune into how you're feeling when you get the urge to shop or when you're actually shopping. Are you feeling bad? Are you in a negative emotional state that you're trying to correct or you're trying to make yourself feel better? That's the biggest indication for me. There was a study that was done a while back that showed they actually studied the difference in just emotional swings between, let's just call it a normal shopper. I go like this, normal.
Right.
But let's just say like a non-compulsive shopper and a compulsive shopper. A normal shopper, when they would shop, they would be in pretty much like an average to normal mood. And their mood throughout the shopping experience was just a steady tick up. It went from like good to better to best. What a compulsive shopper, they studied their mood, is a compulsive shopper typically starts in a negative emotional state. And then when they shop, it shoots up. So it really does give them that like really quick, huge surge of dopamine, that like false pleasure, kind of that euphoria. But then what happened is after they would get home, they would crash. And so they would crash and they would even go below where they started. So it's like they were feeling bad. They shopped. It made them feel better temporarily. And then came the spending crash. And they ended up feeling worse than before they even started shopping to begin with. So I would say like the biggest indication is, are you using shopping to distract yourself, to numb yourself? as some sort of buffer. I mean, I know shopping is like the one thing that I think in our society, and like I see it all the time on social media, it's kind of like laughed off. It's like, oh, haha, I have a shopping addiction. And I'm like, a shopping addiction is no different than anyone who's addicted to alcohol or drugs or gambling. I mean, it's a serious thing, right? And it's not something to like take lightly or laugh off. But it's just something that we're kind of like, oh, it's no big deal. Like I shop too much, right? But if you're using shopping to cope, to escape your life, that's a big indication. If you're spending...
I think recognizing that it is tied to these dopamine hits.
Yeah.
Just like alcohol or anything else.
It's the same reactions.
We forget that. At least I've been really surprised by that lately, like how much dopamine is tied to alcohol and how much it's tied to even this right now. I was like, oh, I wasn't even thinking about that.
Yeah, no. It's huge. I mean, they've done a lot of studies, and what happens in our brain when we're with compulsive shoppers is no different than, an alcoholic or something like that, right?
Right.
If you're spending more than you have, if you're going into debt, right? Like if you have a lot of credit card debt, if you're hiding your behavior from other people. So, a lot of my clients will come to me and they're like, yeah, I do a lot of shopping and I'll leave my bags and my purse and I'll bring them in like when I know my husband's not home. Like I don't want my husband, or they have a lot of debt that they've hidden from a spouse or a partner, things like that. Like if you're hiding your behavior, if you're using it to change an emotional state, and also like if you just feel just the need to just constantly be doing it, right? You constantly feel that like
you just
itch.
want something.
Yeah. That wanting to want things.
Yeah. Are you ready to up-level your pleasure practice? I have in mind, and the main things that have helped me are the tools that I've found from Wands. Wands creates luxurious products that encourage us all to honor our body, celebrate our sexuality, and live in pleasure. With more pleasure all the time. One of my favorites, if you listen to this show, then you probably already know, is the Cervix Wand. Wands has trademarked their #1 best-selling glass pleasure wand. It's for vaginal and anal de-armoring, and it's designed for cervical and G-spot stimulation. And let me tell you, it's incredible. It's helped thousands of women become more connected to their bodies and their pleasure, and supports them to heal pelvic pain through self-yoni massage, and helps awaken more pleasure. Just recently, I've ordered the Venus Wand, another trademarked wand from Wands, and it's designed to activate and awaken the G-spot and more. Also, don't miss one of their new offerings, which are free bleed blankets that can be used as waterproof intimacy blankets. They have a beautiful selection now available. But take a look around at wands.com, that's WAANDS, because they have a huge selection of incredible items like yoni eggs, crystal pleasure wands in amethyst, black obsidian, anything that your heart desires, and so much more. Check them out at wands.com, that's WAANDS.com, and use my link in the show notes to get 10% off, or simply enter my code Amy Edwards at checkout. Again, that's WAANDS, wands.com. Y'all, I have started using higher dose products, and I am such a fan. You know, I don't put anything on this podcast that I am not 100% completely behind. And I have a special discount code for you for all higher dose products. I'm so excited. If you don't know, Higher Dose is a wellness company. They have wellness tech products, they have tools, they have supplements, and they have body care. They have so many things that are hot right now too, that are really biohacking and up-leveling our lives at home, which is really cool. They have an infrared sauna blanket. They have an infrared PEMF mat that I'm so excited to be sharing about soon. One of my favorites though is the red light face mask. It stimulates collagen, it activates glowing skin, reduces fine lines, regenerates cells, and it's soft. It's not like one of the hard plastic ones, so you can kind of move it around on your body, which I've been doing, and I am seeing amazing results. I am absolutely addicted to it. I use it every single night, and I'm using it in conjunction with one of their other products, the Glow Serum. And I'm very picky about what I put on my skin, and I am loving the Glow Serum. It's specially formulated to plump and hydrate and stimulate radiant skin, which that's the goal. They have a ton of other products too, magnesium ingestibles, magnesium body care, which has a healing oil and a serotonin soap that you can use in your bath, which I've been using too. It boosts your mood, enhances your skin, and deepens your detox, gets you calmed down. Anyway, I'm a fan, so I'm so excited to offer you 15% off using my code MAGIC15. Go to the show notes. You can click through on the link right there, or if you go to Higher Dose, just enter the code MAGIC15 and you'll get 15% off. Higher Dose has been featured in Goop, Glamour, Elle, Vogue, Bazaar, Allure, basically you name it. And there's a reason why. So go check it out. It's at higherdose.com and enter my code MAGIC15 for 15% off. Well, so what were you? What led you to this work? And like, what were you in that? I'm guessing most of the time, something that leads us.
Yeah, I wouldn't say so. Yeah, I'm happy to share my story because my story is how I really came into this work. And my story happened a decade ago. I'm almost 34. I'll be 34 in a month. When I graduated from college, I got my first big girl job out of school. And
what'd you study?
I was a marketing major at Texas A&M.
Okay.
Not too far from here. Mm-hmm. I actually got recruited to go work at a car dealership of all things. Have you heard of Sewell?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Sewell.
Yeah. So Sewell recruits really heavily out of a lot of local colleges, right?
Okay.
And so I got recruited to go work in the sales department. So I sold Cadillacs. And back in Dallas.
Did you drive a Caddy?
I did. They gave me a free Caddy to drive. It was, truly, I thought I had made it. I'm serious. I really did.
It.
Yeah. So I grew up in Dallas. My parents lived in Dallas. I also graduated with $40,000 of student loan debt from my undergrad. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to move at home. I'm going to live at home for a year. I'm going to be making $60,000 and
no car payment.
I know. They gave me a Cadillac to drive. It wasn't my car, but they were like, here, you can drive. They call them demos, right? They're like, you can drive this car around. They paid for the gas, the insurance. They paid for my cell phone bill. Pretty much all of my other bills were covered just by me living at my parents' house. So I had no expenses.
A great time.
It should have been. It should have been. It wasn't really, but it should have been. So I went into that year being like, okay, this is it. This is the year that I can really make such substantial progress and really set myself up with a really solid financial foundation. And I was like, I'm going to save up all this money and pay off my loans and all this sort of stuff. Well, I started working at the car dealership. I realized very quickly that I hated it. I did not like selling cars. I was the one woman on the showroom floor. It was me and 10 other men, right? And just a lot of other things. I didn't handle the transition from college world to real world super well. I missed my friends. Me and my college boyfriend broke up, and it was just this I was in it. And so I remember when I first started my job, the first paycheck I got, I went up to North Park Mall, this really ritzy mall.
I know North Park. Okay. I went to SMU. So.
Okay. Well, then you know North Park.
I do.
I stroll into North Park.
It's a great place to spend money.
We got some ritzy stores in North Park, right? I stroll into North Park, and I'm like, I got money to spend, right? Mm-hmm. I'm going into Nordstrom's and J. Crew, and I was like, okay, I need to build up a corporate wardrobe.
It's a good Nordstrom too.
It is. It's a really good Nordstrom's, yeah. And I remember pretty much spending my entire first paycheck on a new wardrobe for myself.
I got way too excited right there, by the way. Oh my God. I was
I
gave myself away right then. Okay. Sorry.
Okay. Well,
I was like, oh, it's a good note. I just had a moment of flashback to what I've bought there.
I know. And you know what the funniest thing is that people, the first thing they ask me when they hear my story is well, what did you buy? Tell me, what were the things that you bought?
We're looking for vicarious dopamine.
They're like, I'd love to see your closet. And I'm like, listen, I don't even own any of that stuff anymore. It's all gone. Seriously, I've purged it all. So I spent my entire first paycheck on clothes or whatever. Because in my mind, I was like, I need to build up a corporate wardrobe.
Of course.
And I'll say this, I was a 90s girl. I grew up in the 2000s. I grew up watching How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days, 13 Going on 30, Devil Wears Prada. Okay. So I went into the corporate world thinking in my head that is how I needed to show up at my job.
I'm going to call that the aftermath of, that's the runoff from Sex and the City, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And so that was the idea in my head that I really had of I have to wear designer. I always have to be put together, have to be dressed to the nines. That's really in my head what I thought. And the reality of it was I could have showed up to the dealership in a potato sack and the guys would have been like, hey, they wouldn't have cared. They wouldn't have even have noticed. Right. But in my head, because of all of this, I guess conditioning and stuff that I'd absorbed growing up, that's what I really thought. So I say that like first trip, I say it like opened up the spending faucet. I will never forget like the euphoria that I got from those first couple of shopping trips. And so then when all of this stuff started happening, when I was like, oh, I hate selling cars and I miss my friends and I'm lonely and I'm living at home with my parents and blah, 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 blah. I would look for ways to escape, and shopping was my escape. Like almost on a daily basis, I was leaving the dealership and going up to North Park. And I'm telling you, like, the salespeople got to know me.
Oh,
they
I
were
bet.
like, oh, Paige is here on her lunch break. And it was not uncommon for me to just drop, $300, $500 on my lunch break.
I mean, I owned a store, so
Yeah.
I lived both sides of this. You
Yeah,
know, like
right.
I knew the pages.
Yeah, I'm sure. Exactly.
20 something.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it was, it was like they
were
saw
my
me
favorite.
coming. I'm sure they were. I mean, I was certainly the sales associate's favorite. It's
Oh,
because
yeah.
they knew that I was going to buy a lot and they could sell me a lot and they were going to get good commissions, right?
Yeah.
And,
It's fun, too. It's just fun.
I know. Well, and I think like part of me too is, again, this really goes into like the mindset part of it, and like almost kind of like my ego that was the first time in my life I had ever had money. I didn't grow up with a lot of money. I was all, up
And it
until
was
that
yours.
point.
You were making it.
Yeah, up until that point, like I probably had no more than like $20 in my bank account at any point in time. And so there was a part of me that really liked like being able to your point, like walk into Nordstrom's and be like, I can shop here. I can afford to buy things here. That was something that had never like been a reality for me in my life ever. And there was something about it that I was just like, the euphoria of it, and like it just kind of like took over my ego, and that like really fed into it. And
I mean, maybe it's, I don't know. I don't want to say it's like standard, but maybe it's a bit of a rite of passage to get to this place, like acknowledging like,
Yeah.
hey, something in me needed that moment.
like I've made it.
Yeah. And like,
Yeah.
if people are listening to this and like, oh gosh, beating yourself up for that, don't, because maybe you needed to feel like that for a minute.
No, yeah, totally.
100%.
And it was a huge part of like the journey for me and the lesson for me. But like,
I think for me too.
Yeah,
I can resonate with that.
like the problem is that I just kept doing it and doing it and doing it, and I didn't stop. And it was just like I was pretty much going up to the mall. I would say like on a 5-day work week, 3 or 4 times a week, spending a couple $100 on each shopping trip. And so when the end of that year came to move out of my parents' house, my parents were like, "Okay, Paige, like it's been a year, bye bye." I couldn't even afford to move out of my parents' house. Like I literally shopped away my $60,000 salary. And
with no rent to pay, I'm guessing.
no
Right.
expenses. Like
Right.
literally, like people are like, you didn't spend your whole salary, you had expenses. And I'm like, I really didn't. Like I really didn't.
That makes it such an interesting example.
Yeah.
Because you really didn't.
I know. And so it came time to move out of my parents' apartment, and I couldn't even afford the security deposit, because the apartment was like, well, we need, first month's rent and the security deposit.
Oh,
and I'm
shit.
like, I don't have it. And my mom's looking at me like, what do you mean you don't have it? You know what I mean? Like because she knew what I made.
Did you hide at all your purchases from your parents?
Yeah,
Okay.
I did all of the stuff that I was talking about, like, using shopping to change my mood, hiding my behaviors. Just, it really did it was like clockwork, right? Like noon, the clock would strike noon and I'd be like, okay, I'm going to lunch. And it was like, I would just head up to the mall. Like, so I definitely like checked all of those boxes. I was a complete compulsive shopper, like 100%.
Wow.
And, so that was kind of like my wake up call, and I started really like diving into it. And the only advice that I could find was unsubscribe from emails and, like just all the typical like surface level stuff. And I'm like, but you don't understand, like, that's not going to help me, because I don't even need to be getting the email. Like, I'm just going to go up to the store, or like, delete your credit card number out of your credit card autofills. Like, I know my credit card by heart. That's not going to help me. You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't help. Like, so it was like all, if you go and Google, like, do it right now, like Google, like, how to stop impulse shopping. This is the sort of stuff you're going to get, right? Unsubscribe from emails, unfollow people from social media, delete your credit card autofill. And while that can be helpful to some, for those of us who like, this is a compulsive thing, I say it's slapping a Band-Aid on an open wound, right? It's like, you need something more than that. You need something deeper. And I do think that like the quick tips in the beginning can help you get started and can give you momentum, which I think are great, right? Like that's where you have to start. But like we've been talking about, it just goes so much deeper than that. Like the mindset, the emotions behind it. That's the part that a lot of people don't even think about, because when we think about money, we think of math and black and white and numbers, and it's very masculine, and it's,
and we think of income.
Yes.
Period. Like,
Yes.
and like, I mean, yeah, attached to that is output or whatever you want to call it, paying, but still it's sort of like not the focus.
Yeah. Well, and I think like income is definitely important, right? Like, of course,
yeah, no doubt.
It's like I say, like the inflow of money and the outflow of money, and both are important. But to your point, if you go like the personal finance space is all about the inflow.
I think that's what I meant.
Inflow. It's
yes.
all about like how to make more money and how to negotiate a raise and how to do this and how to get paid your worth. All of that is super important.
Totally. We've been talking about it on this show.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's the outflow piece of it. And I always say, like, if you can't manage $30,000, you're not going to be able to manage $300,000 or $60,000 or whatever. Like if you have it's like your problems grow with you. And I think so many of us get into that mindset of the solution to my problem is simply making more money. And then we make more money. And then we realize that that wasn't actually the solution to our problem, because all of our behaviors are still there. I say, like, you're going to take your brain with you. Like when you go from making $30,000 to $100,000, you still have the same brain that's going to revert to the same thoughts and mindset and behaviors. Now you just have $100,000 to spend instead of $30,000 to spend. And so I'm like, some people do have an income problem. Like some people, yes, when I look at their scenario, I'm like, okay, when I look at what's coming in and what they're spending on, I'm like, yes, this is clearly an income problem, an inflow. You're just not making enough money. But a lot of people, I'm like, you're making good money. This isn't an inflow problem. This is an outflow problem. And a lot of women I work with, they make great money. Like they're doctors, they're lawyers, they're business owners, right? They're like, I make great money, but I don't have anything to show for it. And that was me, right? At 22 years old, making $60,000 a year, I had nothing to show for it. So
what'd you do?
So the first couple of things that I did when I first realized that all of the advice out there was not great advice was I had to kind of start diving into a couple of things.
Well, first of all, you recognized the problem pretty fast. You stopped digging your hole.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
and I want to say this too. Like when I tell my story, it all sounds like very fast and very succinct, but I would say this was it was like the journey of getting from where I was to where I am now, a decade in the making, right? This stuff like definitely takes time. The first things that I really started to dive into, like just a couple of quick tangible things, is I just started writing down my spending in a journal. I was like, I'm not even going to do anything with this information. I'm literally just going to bring consciousness to like what's going on.
I love that, because that's what we were talking about. Like it's just this consciousness.
Yeah.
Like even if you can just boil it down to that, like getting conscious about this aspect of it.
And in the beginning, it's not even about like figuring out, oh, what can I cut and what can I save? And it's not even about any of that. Like in the beginning, I say like, don't even worry about that yet.
Like, where's it going?
Yeah. Just start writing down like where you're spending your money, because there's so many things that we just, it's just habitual. It's like we go through the Starbucks drive-through line every day, and that's not bad. I'm not saying like going to Starbucks is bad, but what I'm saying is like, sometimes like so much of the money that we spend is just habitual.
Are you conscious about it?
We're unconscious in doing it. Yeah.
So where do you tell people to write this down at? Does it matter? Notes app or
Notes app, journal, you can do it in Notion. I mean, anywhere.
Okay.
Just get it somewhere where it's all like compiled in one place, right? Okay. So writing down all of your spending, just start there.
And that's what you did.
You just started writing it down. I was like, I'm just going to start writing it down.
And then were you like, huh?
And then I was like, holy crap, right? And I think also just recognizing too that like the behavior change is the part that's going to take time. Like just because you're writing down your spending doesn't mean, oh, all of a sudden I'm going to stop completely shopping, right? That's just like unrealistic to think.
I feel like, since I can't spend on this, then sometimes I'll compensate by spending too much at the grocery store, pretend it's necessities or something. I don't know.
Yeah. So just start with writing down everything that you're spending. And then the things I want to buy list is also really big. Like if there's something, like start that practice of getting yourself out of that, like see it, want it, buy it, into the see it, want it. Like I'm going to pause and give myself some time. Start your things I want to buy list.
I've done that. I have that list going.
Yeah.
Or things that, are like just, I want to be able to spend money on. And I didn't know if that was healthy or not. So I'm really glad to hear that.
No, I think it's, for me, I'm a huge fan of it. I think it's great.
Well, I've noticed, like, when I had one last fall, I noticed that there were things on it that I didn't end up wanting.
Yeah, always.
And that kind of surprised me.
Always.
Okay.
There's always going to be things that, like, you don't.
Do you put new car on there? Or, like, do you put big stuff on there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll put big stuff on there. Like right now I have like a $7,000 couch on mine.
Sweet.
Right? Like,
yeah.
And who knows if I'll actually ever end up like getting the couch, right? But it's it's always been the couch that like I've, like
your dream couch.
I see it and I'm like, oh my God, that couch, I love it. So it's like on my things I want to buy list right now. And I'm like, I'm going to give myself time to kind of like think about this and,
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
And then the other part is I just slowly but surely, I started just kind of like immersing myself like in the world of money, because I think for me, especially growing up, money was something that was just never talked about in my household. Even
how much do we hear that? I mean, really?
I mean, and I feel like that's most people's experiences. I feel like most people do not grow up in a household where their parents are openly talking about money and they see the management of it. It's like we either fight about it or we don't talk about it at all. And so money either becomes this like source of pain and anxiety and conflict in our minds, or it just becomes this thing that's like super elusive and nobody ever talks about
right.
it.
I mean, like
secretive.
Like one of the things that struck me that you were talking about, like keeping the list, is like, boy, Amazon is a big one. Like how fat they've made it.
Oh my
way
God.
too easy. Way too easy, right? And so my kids are already getting ingrained in that. And so I'm thinking like, oh, and Justin's mentioned it. He's like, they just order things from Amazon and think it magically happens, you know, because Amazon, I don't know if you know this, has it set up so the kids have like their own account under mine. They can just request something and I have to approve it. So it just seems like,
oh, I didn't know that.
And then, they just magically arrive at your door like Christmas. Talk about a dopamine hit.
Oh my God. We have an Amazon distribution center we live right by DFW airport and there's an Amazon distribution center right there. I'm not kidding. Like there's many times I'll order something from Amazon, 3 hours later, it's on my doorstep.
Right.
Because
it is your instant
distribution
gratification.
center is right there. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's just, we've become so programmed.
A little part of me was like, only 3 hours? Like it took 3 hours, like.
Isn't that crazy? Isn't that crazy?
Like, why couldn't they get it there like in 45 minutes?
Even like with the Prime, like with 2-day shipping now, like I remember a couple years ago, my mind being blown that it was like, oh my God, I can't believe it's going to be here in 2 days. That's so fast.
Now I'm like
2 days.
I know.
Like, come on, Amazon, like get it together. It's wild, like how we just get conditioned into just this instant gratification of like, I want something and there it is. Like just the practice of like having to wait for something and also like reveling in it. But here's what I'll say. This is like one of my, when I heard about this,
I got us off track there.
No, it's okay. No, it's okay. It's okay. So something that I love to remind myself of is that it's actually more pleasurable to your brain to wait for something than to buy it right away. So, and that's just, that's kind of like the truth for anything, but it's going back to dopamine and how dopamine is the anticipation molecule and how like when you see something that you want to buy and you tell yourself, I'm not going to buy this right now, I'm going to wait on it. Waiting on it gives your brain double the amount of pleasure than if you buy it right then and there, because you get to revel in it. You get to be in the anticipation of it. And that's why there was a study that was done that said that people actually get more pleasure from the point of time leading up to a vacation than they do from the actual vacation itself.
Wow.
Have you heard that before?
I think I have, or maybe in a different context, but I definitely saw something that was showing people's brains of enjoyment and then the drop off when it actually happened, whatever it was.
It's the same thing. It's like those days like leading up to like a vacation and you just have that buzz because you're just like, you're like anticipating it, like being at the beach or like wherever you're going, right? And then the vacation is usually great, but it's like the time leading up to it almost feels better. And that's why I always say my favorite day of the entire year is Christmas Eve day.
Totally.
I love Christmas Eve Day so much more than I love Christmas Day. Because Christmas Eve Day, it's like, oh my God, Christmas is tomorrow. And then Christmas, you're like,
yep. That's why
it's basically over.
When people want to surprise their kids with a trip or something, I'm like, don't, like, give them at least a few days notice so they can really like enjoy that anticipation. Like,
Yeah. So it's the same thing with the things that we buy. And so when I can like slow myself down, when my brain is just after like the pleasure, right? It like reminding myself like, it's going to feel twice as good if you can actually wait. Like you're going to get double the amount of pleasure if you can wait versus like if you buy it right away, right?
I've actually played a little mind game with myself too when I've shopped lately. And that is like, I'll walk in somewhere and I just think to myself, you can have absolutely anything you want in here. Just make sure that you really want it.
Yes.
And then just like going in with that mindset has been interesting to me, because then I'm just like, surprisingly, I don't want anything. And I'm like, huh, you know,
when you almost open yourself up to like, I can have anything in here, it makes you so much more selective about what you're going to buy. Right. And that's what I always tell people. I'm like, I want you to be, and it's not being picky. It's not being frugal. I call it just being like a super selective shopper, almost having like really high standards for yourself.
I love that.
Because like the way I think about it. Which I
do, actually. Yeah. I really do. Because then so many times you are like, maybe it's not buyer's remorse, but you're like, you know.
Yeah, because the way I think about it is I'm like, look, I place so much value in my money. Like I love my money. I value my money so highly. And so if I'm going to exchange my money for something, for a physical product or for a service or for experience, I want that thing to be more valuable to me than my money is to me, right? Like I want to be on the winning side of that value exchange. So if you find that that after you buy something, you have a lot of buyer's remorse, or you're not getting a lot of use out of the things that you're buying, it's because you're not buying things that are more valuable to you than your money is to you. Like a question I always love to ask myself is, a month from now, am I still going to want this thing, or would I rather have my money back sitting in my bank account?
There's like this deeper thing that's like, you are devaluing your money.
Yes, totally.
That's so interesting.
Totally. Yeah, exactly.
I think I like knew that, but just putting it into words.
Well,
like,
yeah,
cool.
And it's almost like having, I say like, you're in a relationship with your money, like whether you want to think that you are or you're not. Some people think that they're not because they're like, I don't care about money, which means that, and it's like, even if you're totally avoidant or dismissive, or you're like, I don't care about money, you still have a relationship with money. All of us do. All of us who are operating in this world have a relationship with money. And so it's like, what's the value that you're placing in that relationship, to your point, right? Are you treating your money the way that you would want to treat someone that you're in an actual relationship with? And knowing that, like, is the relationship that you have with money right now, is it a good one? Is it a healthy one? Like, is it one that you would want to be in? Like, would you want to be on the receiving end?
Are you feeding it junk food or whatever that would be like?
Or are you completely avoiding it? Are you not paying attention to it? Are you saying bad things about it, right? Are you constantly telling it like it's not enough, right? Thinking about money as like, I have a relationship with my money. What is the status of that relationship? And when you have a healthy relationship with money, you will value it so highly. And when you value it really highly, you become very selective about the things that you choose to exchange it for. And it's like, it's not being frugal. It's not telling yourself, I can't have this. To your point, it's like, I can have anything in here, but what do I actually want? Like what would be valuable enough to me that I would say like, yes, this thing is going to be more valuable to me than my money is to me. And when you get to that point, you spend so much less, right? It's not even about telling yourself, I can't have this, I can't have that. It's just being selective about like, what am I going to choose to exchange my money on?
Does that relate to this concept of be it to see it, like living? I think that sometimes it can get mixed up, muddy, when people are like, oh, but I'm supposed to live as if I'm already a millionaire, let's say.
Yes.
And so that version of me would buy this, like, and so then you end up overspending. Am I making myself clear? Maybe phrase it better.
No. You hear this you're totally clear, because I hear this all the time. Like, good. So I call it like spending from your future self, but not against your future self.
Okay.
So that's like the big difference is Because what you're saying is spending against your future self, which we
Can you clarify that?
Yeah. So spending against your future self would be like, well, my future self drives a
Porsche. Mine does. Mine drives a Porsche.
Okay. So my future self drives a Porsche. So I'm going to go out and I'm going to drive a Porsche to almost kind of like get myself to that future self. When the reality of it is that current you can't afford.
I can't go pay cash for a Porsche right now.
Right. Yeah. It's like you can't afford the Porsche. So in that instance, what you're doing is you're actually spending against your future self because you've just taken yourself away or farther away from like a financial standpoint, from a numerical standpoint of like where you're actually wanting to get to.
So I would be sitting in the Porsche, but actually further away from the future me that owns the Porsche. I don't know.
Well, so here's how I like to do it, right?
Okay.
Because I think there's a big difference between like knowing the life that your future self has, right? And I think this is great. I think it's wonderful to think about like, where does she live? What kind of car does she drive? What does her wardrobe look like? But I think where the message gets skewed sometimes is like, we think that, oh, like because that's what she has in the future, that's what I need to have right now.
Right.
And I think that that's not the case because I think it's asking yourself like, that's where I want to get to. So if that's where I want to get to, like, what do I need to be doing in this moment? And in this moment, it's less about what you have and it's more about what you're going to embody, right?
Exactly. It's like the feelings behind it, right?
So
or
it's
underneath
like,
it.
yeah. So it's like if future me 10 years down the road is driving a Porsche, that doesn't mean that I need to have the Porsche right now. The question I need to be asking myself is not, how do I get myself into a Porsche right now? The question is, how do I turn myself like into that person from the inside out? Like, how can I start to do that work right now?
Because that person is not afraid to look at their bank account every day.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
And so it's kind of like taking the steps from an embodiment perspective of like, how do I get myself to that version of myself that owns the Porsche, like to where her bank account is at the point where she can just stroke a check for the Porsche, even if that's not my reality today. But by you going out and doing all of those things now, when you really can't afford it, it's not going to be good. And I will say this, it often creates so much trouble in our lives because I'm really big on like work on your identity first. Mm-hmm. It's again, like your spending self-concept. And I also call this like just your capacity to like have money. You see this with lottery winners. What's the stat? The stat's crazy.
It is crazy.
30% of lottery winners end up declaring bankruptcy. 70% of them end up going completely broke. You see this a lot with NFL players too. Like 80% of NFL players end up basically being broke, like 2 years after leaving the league. Yeah. Either experiencing financial hardship or being completely broke. And I think it's because
Can you start coaching NFL players?
I should. That's a really good idea.
Really?
I know. It's very sad. But I think the reason the reason that this happens, a lot of people are like, oh, well, it's because, they have family coming out of the woodwork, and all that is true. But I actually think it's because people do exactly what you talked about. They're like, oh, I'm going to go out, I'm going to buy all of these things because like that's what the best version of me does and has, but their identity has not yet caught up to that. And that was one of the biggest reasons that I did what I did, was because I was still in the identity and I still had the self-concept of being like a broke college student who didn't have more than $20 in her bank account. And so then when I started making $60,000, my reality did not match my identity. And your brain is always going to try to revert you back to your identity. Your brain will always find ways to self-sabotage that and bring you back to that identity. And so that gap between your reality and your identity, if there's a big gap between those two things, it can create a lot of problems. And so that's what I say first, like, what is the identity and what's the self-concept that your future self has around money? Figure that out first. Don't go out and buy a bunch of stuff first, because that's not the answer. And that's what we think. This is just called aspirational spending. We think that we're going to go out and when we buy all the stuff, then we will assume the mindset. We'll go and buy the stuff and then we will assume the identity.
It. Yeah.
Right. So it's like, we see this all the time, right? Like, for instance, let me think of an example. Like, if you want to say like, oh, I want to start running. I want to be a runner. I want to assume the mindset of being a runner. What do most of us do? We're going to go out. We're going to go buy new tennis shoes and we're going to go buy new Lulu workout
Cute
sets and
shorts.
AirPods and the Apple Watch. And we're going to be like, okay, I'm ready to run. But all of those things, that's not what makes you a runner. What makes you a runner is actually going out and running. Right?
Right.
But our brains don't work that way because our brains try to tell us like, get all the stuff and then the stuff will give you the identity. But the identity isn't going to come from the stuff. I always say you want the stuff to support an already existing identity. So I say like, just go start running. Like most of us have shoes that we can put on our feet and clothes that we can put on our body to at least just go outside or get on a treadmill and start running. Right? So I'm like, start running, right? Or, you know, maybe you want to start journaling and you're like, I have to find the perfect journal. So you go and you spend $60 on some like fancy journal because you think that once you have the journal, that will turn you into someone who journals.
Totally.
But then you buy the journal
Totally.
and you never start journaling, right? And so it's like, it's not the stuff that turns you into who you want to be. It's like you do that work from the inside out, and then you can get the stuff to support that already existing identity. And people often do it the other way around. And that's what gets people in trouble. And that's like when you kind of start looking around and you're like, well, I got the Peloton bike that I rode like, 10 times. And, I got all the, the stuff for the hobby. I got all the art supplies for the hobby that I thought I was going to dive into. And I painted like one thing. And so you start to have all these things that you're like, I bought all this stuff because I thought buying this stuff would like turn me into that person. When really I'm like, just start with what you have. Most of what you want to do, you already have. Like if you want to start journaling, get a pen and a piece of paper. Start journaling. My rule is like, be consistent with the action for at least 30 days. And if you can prove to yourself that you've done that, and then after that, you want to go out and you want to buy the fancy shoes and all the tech and all that sort of stuff. Once you've established the habit of running, great. But don't fall into the trap that buying all the stuff is going to turn you into that person, because it never does.
Are you pretty disciplined? Like, how does the word discipline strike you? Because this sounds like pretty disciplined behavior.
Yeah, I would say that I'll say this, discipline is something that I've gotten much better at. I'm much more disciplined now.
It's like a muscle?
Yeah, I'm much more disciplined now than I used to be.
Obviously.
And this goes back to even like the way you asked me that question, are you someone who's disciplined, right? Like that's just how we think of discipline. We think of discipline like a personality trait. Like, hi, I'm Paige. I have blonde hair, blue eyes. I'm 5'5" and I'm disciplined, right? And it's like, no, like discipline is something that you practice and you get better at. And so like if you were to look at my spending habits 10 years ago and look at them today, you wouldn't even think that you were looking at the same person. You would be like, that's not the same girl. That's not the same person I'm looking at.
That's encouraging though for anyone.
And that's why I always say like discipline is a skill and it's a muscle.
Spending
is a skill.
There you go.
It's all like detaching these things from your identity and from your personality. So yes, right now I do have a self-concept of being someone who's disciplined, and I think that helps me be more disciplined, but I also understand that discipline is something that I practice. It's not like this box that I have to like fit myself in. And so when I do make an undisciplined choice, which of course I do, I'm human, right? Like
that was my next question.
Yeah. The goal is not to be perfect. I make undisciplined choices like all the time, right? I don't make it mean anything.
Yeah.
I don't like use it against myself to be like, oh, here we go again. Like, here I go. Like spending money on this thing or doing this thing that I said I wasn't going to do, right? Like I don't make it mean anything. I don't use it against myself. I'm just like, okay, like we had a misstep.
That's huge. Made
an undisciplined choice. Like no big deal. Like we're just going to get back to it and
on
keep
track.
Going.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I do have the self-concept of being a disciplined person, but does that mean that I do it perfectly? Like, no. Of course not. I still find myself falling into these patterns, right? And I have to catch myself of, wanting to pick up a new hobby, and my brain does the thing of, oh, well, we need this, we need this, we need this, we need this, we need this. And I have to calm my brain down and be like, no, brain. We're going to try the thing first. And then if we want to get all the stuff, we can. Yeah.
How about in a relationship? Like, how is that adjusted for you? And what are some things that you guys use together to stay on track?
Yeah. Well, I'll say this, like, I'm really big about when two people come into a relationship and they're managing money as a shared resource, or maybe just like, maybe you are, maybe you're not. I find that every situation is different when it comes to couples. And I typically don't like to give like cookie cutter advice in terms of like, you should combine your finances or you should keep it separate, because
God, no.
I think
right?
every single relationship has a different dynamic and it works completely different. What works for my husband and I is we have everything combined. We always have. Even before we were married, we had everything combined. That's just what works for us. Some people are like, God, no, that would never work for me, right? But so I would say the most important thing.
I've been married twice, so I've done it all.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So to me, the most important things is figuring out what your roles are going to be. And I think I hear this a lot with the women that I coach. They're like, how do I get my husband more involved? I want to get him more involved. He doesn't want to sit down and look at the numbers with me and that sort of thing. And then I'm like, then don't make him. Don't make him do that. Because if you're bringing him to the table and you are forcing him to do that, and you're like, you have to do this and we have to do this together and da 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 da. If you're trying to fit a what's the saying? A square peg into a round hole. It's never going to work. So my husband and I, like a lot of people are surprised to hear this, I'm the in the weeds. Like in our relationship, I'm the in the weeds person. So
I don't think that's surprising to hear at all. Of course you are.
And what I'm saying is like he is not. Like he never logs into the budgeting software. Like he doesn't do any of that. And a lot of people are really like surprised to hear that he's so detached.
That you're okay with somebody.
And that I'm okay with that,
Yeah.
right? But I'm
that.
just like, listen, like I learned a long time ago that like trying to make Ryan's dynamic with money just something that it's not helping any of us, because then we both get frustrated and it's not doing us any good. So we sit down and we have goals that we want to work on together, and we will agree on those goals collectively. And like Ryan just wants to fly at 30,000 feet, and then I'm kind of like the executor. I'm the one that's like being like, okay, like this is going to go here and this is going to go here, and I'm the one that kind of like initiates the plan. So I think it's like figuring out like, what are your roles and what are your strengths and playing to that?
Yeah. But like those women asking the question, like, are they feeling resentful about that? Because then that can be a problem, right? Like how you have to accept those roles.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing, like, and this is where the big differentiator comes in, right? I tell the women this, I'm like, listen, find a way to get him involved in a way that he would want to be involved. But just because you're the one in the weeds, that doesn't mean that this solely and completely falls on your shoulders. This doesn't mean that like whether you guys hit your goal or not, or how well you guys are doing financially, that solely falls on your shoulders because you're the one like crunching the numbers, right? So for me, I always say like, if your husband or your partner doesn't want to necessarily be like in the weeds with you because he just doesn't care about that, like what does he care about, and how can you involve him so that you're kind of tapping in to that part of him? So for me, right, like for our dynamic in our relationship, Ryan doesn't necessarily care like if we went over our eating out budget by $30 or like we're under here, over here. Like he doesn't care about any of that, right? What he cares about is he wants to make sure that we have enough money to invest here and invest here and invest here. Like that's what he really, really cares about. So that's how I choose to like loop him in, right? Because like sometimes like the women that I work with, they'll be like, my husband's spending so much money and, you know, like, how do I get him to stop and whatever? And I'm like, well, first thing to do is like, don't nag him about it. And like, I don't even like to use that word, but it's like, don't be like, you're spending too much money, da, 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 da. Because oftentimes all that's going to happen is it just makes the person double down and just keep doing the behavior that they're doing. So it's like, how can we bring them into a way that like we can tell them and show them how their actions are impacting something that they actually care about. So I'll bring Ryan in and I'll be like, hey, listen, we overspent, and I don't give him all the details, but I'm like, we spent more than we needed to this month. And because of that, like, we're not going to be able to put as much into our investments as we normally do. And that makes him perk up like real quick. He's like, oh, wait, what? Like, because that's what he cares about, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the part that he cares most about. So I don't like nag him about this, and this, and like bring him into details that I know he's not going to care about, or he's going to glaze over, or he's going to feel, or where he's going to like shut down, because I've tried that. Like if that worked, I would tell you to do that, truly, but it doesn't work. Like it just makes the other person shut down. So it's like, if they don't care about being in the numbers, what do they care about? Right. And maybe it's like he goes on a golf trip every year with his friends, or maybe it's like he really wants to save up for this or save up for this. It's not like you holding that over their head and saying like, well, we can't do this if you keep doing it. It's just saying, hey, I know that you really want to do this, and I know that this is really important to you, and I want you to be able to do it. But the way things are going right now, like it's just not going to jive. Like the numbers just aren't going to work. And I find that typically like that brings him in or her in, or your partner in, to where you start working together at it as a team, rather than like nitpicking at each other. Well, you spent this and you spent this and you spent this.
That was kind of my next question.
It's just not like, because it's not productive.
It's not productive. And like, I think that sometimes you can get in that rut of like, well, then why don't we? What have you been spending? Like, and that kind of thing. And it's just like dropping these things and understanding that you're both working toward responsibility.
I know. And it's not a competition. And like, sometimes I just say like, Ryan and I don't do this. But I know a lot of couples do, just like, partially combining your finances and then having some of it separate, like where you each have like a pool of money that you can just do whatever the heck you want with, no questions asked, and it's none of the other person's business. I know a lot of couples do it that way, and that works well for a lot of couples. If you think that would work well for you, do it. But I think it's like figuring out the dynamic that works for you, understanding what each other's roles are. And the last thing I'll say is like, this has been really big for Ryan and I, is like, you have to have conversations with money with your partner that just go beyond the numbers. I think it's really critical of talking about your money history and your money past with your partner, asking them questions like, how was money handled in your household? Did you ever see your parents fight about money? How, like, just like really uncovering those things about your partner, because sometimes what we like to do with money is we like to just immediately default to criticism, especially with our partners, of like,
so true,
you're spending money on stupid stuff, or you're like, why are you doing this? Or why are you doing that? Like, we immediately just default to the criticism.
Yeah.
And I say, before you go to the criticism, go to curiosity first, get curious. And when you kind of understand a lot of those things about your partner, it might not get you to the point where you agree with it, and you don't have to, but you'll at least understand it. You'll understand why they're doing what you're doing. Like, I can't tell you how many things that like Ryan does that like when we first started dating or when we were engaged or whatever, I was like, why are you doing that? Like, it made no sense to my brain. None. I was just like, I don't understand why you're spending money in this way. Or like, we would have a pool of money and we would want to do completely separate things with it. And I could not understand for the life of me, like, why Ryan would want to, why he was like making this choice and why he wanted to do that. But when we actually took the time to really like uncover each other's money past and money history, there were so many things that I was like, oh, okay. So that's why that's important to you. That's why you do what you do. And you haven't necessarily changed my mind. And I can't say that like I agree with you, but I at least understand. Like I'm at least not like, you're wrong, I'm right. Like, it's like we can come to a place of like, we have different opinions on this, but I can totally see and respect where you're coming from. It's such a huge difference, like, between those two things.
It's excellent advice.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it really is. Because I just feel like I never did that in my past relationships.
Yeah.
And I've done that more with Justin now. And we're having more of these conversations, but getting into that backstory.
It's huge.
Like, I've noticed things about him and I'm like, I'm just going to suggest this, like maybe because of X and Y in your past,
Yeah. And the thing with money that makes it really tricky, I feel, is that because we view it as such like a black and white resource, oftentimes we think that there's only one right answer and one right way to do things. And oftentimes, selfishly, we all get into the mindset of like, my way is the right way, right? Like, and you hear all this stuff like so much all the time in money. Like, there's so many rules with money. Like, I'm going like this, like, with money, like, you should never lease a car. Like, oh my God, there's like this rule. You should never lease a car. Like,
you're throwing money away on rent.
You're throwing money.
That's a big one.
You should never rent. You should always own. What's another one? It's like Dave Ramsey. One of his big things is like, you basically should have no life if you're in debt, and you should live beans and rice, rice and beans until you get your debt paid off, and you shouldn't be investing until you're completely debt free, like rule upon rule upon rule upon rule. And so we take these rules and we think that they're facts of the world, and it's how not only we should live our lives, but everyone else should live our lives, including our spouses and our partners. And so it's like when we come into these dynamics where people are saying, well, I don't know about that. Like, I don't know if that's the best idea. We're like, well, what do you mean? Like, this is the rule. Like, this is how you have to do it. When just realizing like, this is one way to do it. And this is one perspective and like one person's suggestion, but there's so many other options, and just opening yourself up to like what works for us, right? Like freeing yourself of that, freeing yourself of that. Like maybe I will rent for the rest of my life, because honestly, that sounds pretty fantastic to never have to worry about like replacing something or something breaking or whatever.
That's right. That's right.
Like maybe I will rent, and maybe I will lease cars for the rest of my life, because I like the convenience of it, and I like to have a new car every 3 years. And you know what? Maybe like I will go on trips while I'm still in debt, or I will invest while I'm still in debt, and I'll go completely against what Dave Ramsey says. It's just like you can make your own rules. And I think especially for women, we don't give ourselves that power to say like, it's okay if you don't want to like follow like all the rules. Like the biggest thing is like, is it working for you? Is it working for you? And if the answer is yes, great, keep doing it. But if the answer is no, like don't just keep doing it because it's what you think you should do.
Right.
Because we follow these rules and it doesn't work for us. And then we think like, oh, well, there must be something wrong with me. This works for everyone else and it's not working for me. So like, what's wrong with me? Right.
Yep.
So it's like
Then
giving
we're back to
yourself
that.
permission to like make your own rules with you and your relationships. I mean, it's just,
I love this approach
It's
so
so
much.
huge.
I love
Yeah.
your approach so much because it acknowledges the gray area that there is in life. And like, I get real tired of seeing things, whether it's about money or whether it's about food, whatever it is. Like
Yeah.
this is, everyone has to be a carnivore or whatever the fuck. I'm like, no,
Yeah.
no.
I know. No.
Like maybe not, and it just, I think the older I get, the more I realize that there's no one size fits all. So quit acting like there is,
And I think it's like we're so programmed to like look outside of ourselves for answers.
Oh
right?
boy, I am. Like, tell me the right way to do it and let me make a
Especially
list
with
about
money. Oh my gosh. Like I can't exactly, right? I know. And I heard you talk about this on a past episode too, but it's like we're so like greedy for the how. How do I do it?
Oh my
What
God.
are the steps?
Do you see what I title every
what's the
episode?
blueprint?
How to stop overspending.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. And it's, but like we're so greedy for the how. And like, that's just what we want. Like we want the how, we want the steps. We want someone just to tell us like how to get from point A to point Z. And I'm like, listen, like with money, like I know that you think that there's this like path and this math equation that you have to follow. And like, is there a mathematical component to money? Of course there is, right? I'm not going to deny that. But I'm like, money is 90% mental, emotional, and to your point, that gray space. And the 10% of it is just the math of
numbers,
it.
yeah.
And most people, when they think of money,
It's the opposite.
they don't even factor in any of those other things. They just think it's the math and the numbers.
Yep.
And that's why like so often when people get the blueprint or here's how to create a budget, here's how to make a debt payoff plan. And people are like, okay, yeah. And they do that.
Let me go buy my special notebook.
Exactly. And I'm going to buy my special notebook to do that.
Yeah.
They'll do that. And then stuff will inevitably break down and start falling through the cracks. And then they're like, well, okay, this isn't working. This isn't working for me. What's wrong with me? Mm-hmm. Like I'm bad with money, right? I'm like, it's very, very hard to be bad with money in terms of the numbers, right? Like if you can do third grade math, if you can add and subtract, you have all the skills, the math knowledge, the head knowledge that you need seriously to be
everybody.
Be a savant with money. I'm serious.
No
right?
excuses then.
No excuses. It's like it's the mental and the behavior parts of it that most of us like don't focus on.
Yeah.
And so that's why we try to do the budget and the budget fails. And then we're like,
but it's just like anything, like what energy flows where attention goes.
Yeah.
And so how conscious are you of it is just the greatest place to start, because really that's what you're saying. You're saying like, just pay some attention to it.
Yeah.
Are you even paying attention?
Yeah.
How many of your clients are like not even paying attention?
I would say at least half that come to me, like, haven't looked at their bank account in a really long time.
And then the other
Or like
half
completely
are what?
avoidant. And
Are
then
they
the other avoidant or the other half are, I would say like a little better than that. Like maybe checking in with it like when they get paid, or like the couple of days leading up to payday to like make sure that there's still money in their account. Right. Very, very few of my clients when they first come to me are checking in with their money on a consistent basis. But it's also deciding what it means for you. Like you heard me say, I do it every day. And so many of our brains are going to go, well, she does it every day, so I need to do it every day. No, it's like, what? I know. It's like, well, she does it this way, so I need to do it that way.
Yeah.
And it's like looking inward first and saying, okay, but like what's actually going to work for me? Is daily realistic for me, or is what's more realistic for me like once a week? Like maybe on Sundays, right? Like before, like Sunday afternoons, I'm going to block off, 20 minutes and I'm just going to log in and look for things. Like maybe for you it's once a week, but we're so trained to look inward versus outward. Like I call it influence versus inspiration. We've been so trained to be influenced, like especially now with social media. I mean, even look at the term like influencer.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, I'm an influencer. So it's like we get on social media and we see people like, oh, here's my morning routine. Here's this, here's that, here's my workout routine. What's the first thing that our brains do? Our brains are like,
Is that what I need to be doing?
well, yeah, it's like it's like A, I need to do that, and B, I need to do it exactly how she's doing it with exactly what she's doing it with, right? So it's like, you'll see a video of some influencer sharing her morning routine. She's like, I make my coffee with my coffee machine, and then I come over here and I have my green drink, and then I journal in my affirmations journal and blah 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 blah. And we're like, and then of course she goes, you can find all these things in my Amazon storefront, or you can find all these things in my like to know it page. What do? We immediately go to the Amazon storefront and we buy her coffee machine and her green drink and her journal, and that's being influenced. That's influenced. That's like, I see someone doing these things that I want to do, and our minds go to, if I want to do it that way, I need all of the things that she has.
And you said it's influence versus inspiration.
Versus inspiration, which is like tapping into, again, the embodiment of it. I like how she takes care of herself.
I want to feel peaceful in the morning.
Yeah, it's like I like how she takes care of herself. I like how she's created success for herself. I like how she's cultivated her relationships. And then it's asking yourself the question, how can I do the same with what I already have?
Yeah.
I'm telling you, most of us already have this stuff. Like, it's like, if you want to start a morning routine, you don't need her coffee machine and this and this. It's like, use the coffee machine that you have, write on a freaking piece of paper. Cause it's not even about that stuff. It's about like how it's going to make you feel, right? That's inspiration. Inspiration is looking inward first and saying, how can I create something similar with what I already have? Versus influence, which is, I call it the where did you get that mindset.
Yeah.
Where did you get that? Where did you get that? It's so, I can't even tell you like how many times on social media I get asked that all the time. People are like, I know this is the complete opposite point that you're trying to make in this video, but where did you get your dress?
Yeah.
I know this is the complete opposite point of what you're trying to make in this video, but where did you get that? Like, whatever. Where did you get your bar stools or something? And I'm like, and by the way, I'll say this for the record, I never answer. I know that sounds kind of mean, but I'm just like, you guys don't need another person on the internet, like telling you like, buy this, buy this, buy this, buy this, buy this. I'm like, so I just don't answer. Like anytime anyone's like, where did you get that? Where did you get that? I just don't answer.
I love it. That's part of your brand. I mean, really, let's be real. That's part of your brand.
It's so funny how many like brand deals I get for just like random junk. And I'm like, how this is like the total opposite of like, did you even look at my page before you reached out to me?
Do you know what I'm about?
I'm like, do you know what I do?
The day you do endorse something though, we're all going to be like, apparently we really need that.
Oh.
Well, you had, what, since you mentioned social media, I wanted to jump into that. But before we touch on the rest of your social media, first of all, we're at an hour and a half already, which I'm like, what?
Oh, wow.
I
That
know.
flew.
It's flying by.
Wow.
And there's more I want to get to.
No, that's
but
okay.
Before we got off of what we were just talking about, I wanted to ask you, how do your clients make the leap to be okay spending on you coaching them?
That's a great question. Yeah. Well, I think it's like, here's how I always put it, because many of the people that come to me and get coaching, I'm like, listen, think about it this way. You're going to be spending the money anyways, right? Like, because if we, and I'm not saying that like my coaching is the only answer and the only solution, but I'm like, if you're wanting to coach with me and if you're wanting to change this behavior and get better at this, the two choices that we have are that you spend the money, and that happens. And I always offer like a money back guarantee to my clients.
Oh,
I'm
I
like,
love that.
yeah. So I'm like, look, if you don't get what you came for, I'll give you your money back. I never want to keep somebody's money who doesn't have a good experience, right? But I'm like, we're either going to start working together and you're going to change this behavior, or you're not. And the money that you would have spent with coaching with me is going to get spent. And like, that's the thing about what I do. I'm like, maybe it's going to get spent in one fell swoop at Sephora or the Nordstrom's anniversary sale, or maybe it's, like 20 different like late night Amazon
I had
shopping
flashbacks
binges.
to my highest price tags at both those places.
and a lot of times, like, I'll give the price for, my program and my coaching. And what a lot of the women will say to me is, oh, I would have spent that across like 2 or 3 trips to Sephora. Right. And so it's kind of understanding, like, look, like the money is going to get spent. Like that's the reality of it. Like if you continue down this path and if the behavior continues, the money's going to get spent. It's just a question of what. And thinking about it that way usually puts things into perspective of like, okay, like I'm like, if you're
and
really
they've already made it that far.
Yeah. And I'm like, if you're really being honest with yourself, like, and I know that like more than likely this money is gonna be spent on something.
Right.
And I'm like, do you want it to be spent on more stuff that like doesn't matter and isn't aligned and makes you feel terrible, or we can spend it over here? And like I said, I'm like, if you're not happy, I'll give you your money back. And then you can go spend it at Sephora if you want.
Right.
Right. And then you could get the coaching and the Sephora. But I mean, that has never happened, but I always offer it. Just, it's like, I know people, well, and I think especially with compulsive shoppers, it is tough, right? Like people think like, oh, it must be so easy to get people to work with you because they're compulsive shoppers, right? They like want to spend money. Mm-hmm. And of course there is an element to that, but there also is this huge underlying fear of like, I've already spent so much money on just junk and clutter and just stuff that did absolutely nothing for me. And is this just going to be another one of those things? Like, is this just going to be another one of those things that I'm going to look back and be like, why did I do that? That was just right? Like,
I think that's kind of where my head went.
Yeah.
Like, how do they have the confidence in anything that they're spending,
Yeah, exactly. And so that's why I always say, like, I will give you that. That's why I always offer that, because I always want to put their mind at ease of saying, if you're not happy, I will give you every single penny back. Like, I'm not here to keep your money if you're not satisfied and if you don't get what you came for. Mm-hmm. And so that usually kind of like puts their mind at ease, just to be like, okay, right? Mm-hmm. I'm like, it's going to be worth your while or you're going to get your money back.
And so far they all are.
So far they all are.
Okay, let's talk about social media.
Yeah, let's do it.
That's such a thing like that I have to pay attention to in any context. And I have to just really stringently take note of my mindset and have a moment where I'm like, just shut it down.
Yeah. I heard you talk about this on another episode, and I thought you described it really well, where you said like kind of the second that I find my brain going there, and the second that I find my brain going to that kind of negative place, it's just like shutting it down. But I'll say this. I think the reason that social media can be so dangerous to our spending habits is because, well, one, of course, social media is a highlight reel. We all know that. Mm-hmm. We all know that like everything you're seeing on social media is only what people want you to see.
It's easy to forget.
And what people want you to see is they want you to see the prettiest and the best and the most curated parts of their lives, right?
And that's kind of what we want to see if we're being honest about it.
Of course.
Because when somebody shares something else, I'm like,
I know, of course. And that's why social media is social media. That's why it's so addicting, because it's almost like going back to the aspirational spending. So much of what we see and so many of the people that we follow because we aspire to their lifestyle in some way, right? It's aspirational.
Yeah.
Right? It's all aspirational. And so, but the problem becomes, it's like when we see all of these things on social media and we're only seeing the best parts of somebody's life, and they're not showing us the bad parts that are happening behind the scenes. But of course they are happening. We're just not seeing them.
Right.
To your point, it's like we get into these false mindsets, and it becomes easy to forget that like this is a human being who's having, you know, a 50-50 human experience where half of their life is great and half of their life probably isn't so great, but they're only showing us the half that is great.
Right.
And so in our minds, we're like, their life is great. They're always happy. They're living the dream. And then we're over here, you know, on the other side of the screen going, well, you know, I'm stressed and I feel awful.
Yeah.
And
what about mine?
you know, what about me? Like,
yeah.
like we're just on the other side of the screen, like, meh, you know what I mean? And so the mindset that we get into is we think that by going out and, you know, essentially, again, creating a carbon copy of somebody's life, going on their Amazon storefront and buying all of their stuff, we think that, okay, well, they're super happy with the house that they live in and in the car that they drive and with the wardrobe that they have. And I have the opportunity to basically go out and get all those things myself. They put it right here for me. I just need to go to their Amazon storefront and buy it. They seem so happy all the time. And so if I go out and I buy what they have and I bring those things into my world, then I will be happy and I will feel the same way. And that's like the trap, the mindset trap that we fall into instead of just realizing like, this is a human being who lives like a 50-50 experience. Like I always say, like Alex Earl, like, do you know who Alex Earl is? Okay. She's like the it girl on TikTok.
Okay.
I guarantee your daughters know who she is.
I'm sure they do.
Ask your daughters who she is. You know, I always say like Alex Earl lives a 50-50 life. Like she's just not showing it to you, right? Mm-hmm. Like she's showing you like all of the good parts, but she lives a 50-50 life. And that's all we want as human beings. We just want to feel better. That's all we want. We just want to feel better. And consumer culture has programmed us to think that the way that you feel better is through more stuff, right? It's like, buy my thing, have more stuff. The more you have, the happier you'll be. If you have my thing, I will be able to solve this problem for you. Mm-hmm. And that's what advertising is. Advertising actually doesn't sell us a product. Advertising sells us emotions, feelings, like a promise of a future emotional state. So when we see someone on social media and we're like, oh, they're so happy, they're so confident, they're so this, they're so that, our brains automatically make that correlation between how that person feels, which is how we want to feel, and everything in their external world and everything in their external environment. And so we think like they're so happy because they have this, they have that, they have this. So if I want to be happy and if I want to feel the same way they do, then the solution is going out and getting what they have. And then of course it's like we do that and then we get the stuff and it's cool for like, you know, a couple of days, right? Like I call it the hamster wheel, right? Where like you get yourself on the hamster wheel of like, you see something, you buy something, you kind of get that high, that rush, that euphoria for a couple of days, and then it wears off. And then you're right back to like, okay, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? What's the next thing? And I think that's why social media, like with our spending, has just become so, I don't want to use the word like dangerous, but it really has like ignited something that's always been there. Like we've always had the desire to feel better as human beings. And I think for a long time in consumer culture, we've always made that connection between how much we have and how happy we're going to be. But now with social media, like we have a lens into other people's lives that we never, ever had before.
Yeah.
Like 10 years ago, I mean, I grew up in high school, social media didn't even start to become a thing until after I was out of college, right? So I didn't grow up with social media. But I mean, it's like before we had social media, you kind of had a lens into people's lives. But I mean, a lot of people that you were acquaintances with.
I grew up in the 80s.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm like TV. I don't know.
TV.
Like
I know. It's like a lot of people
magazines. We had magazines.
Yeah. Like it's like, but I mean, a lot of people that you knew, it's like you didn't know what the inside of their houses looked like. You didn't know like what their closets looked like or what their ward or what their, I mean, go on TikTok, you see the most like people's ice cube collections, right? Like there's one of my clients is like, I've been buying a lot of ice cube trays because you go on TikTok and you see all these people with like different shaped ice cubes.
Oh my
right?
God. I think it would be so fun to know just what your clients have been buying.
Oh my gosh.
I have really gotten into ice cube trays. It's like, whoa.
Or I know, or
specific.
I'm saying like organizational stuff, like stuff to like organize your homes, like bins.
Love it.
And
I love it.
like all the home edit stuff.
Dude, I could go crazy at a freaking container store.
No, I know.
Yeah.
Like stuff like that.
Oh, my daughter got sucked in and like started buying color-coded tabs for her books and stuff.
Yeah.
And then I made her clean out her room and she was literally throwing them in the trash and I had like a fit.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I know, but it's like all of that stuff. Like we see all that stuff on social media. We just get a glimpse into like these little pockets of people's lives that we would have never, ever, ever gotten before. And it's just taken the comparison to a whole new level. Yeah. I mean, it's taken like the comparison that we used to do to just,
so now I can compare what our ice cube trays are.
Exactly. It's like I'm literally comparing like what my ice cube tray looks like to this girl's ice cube tray. I'm not kidding. It's just like it's crazy. You know what I mean? So
yes.
It's taken what's like always kind of been a problem and just exacerbated it. But it's just getting yourself out of that mindset of, well, and I think it's like reminding yourself of, this person is only showing me like what they want me to see. This is not the complete reality of someone's life. Like watching a 3-minute like day in my life video, you're not actually seeing someone's whole day. It's 3 minutes of their day.
And I think that goes back to your point earlier about like the curiosity aspect, which I love that so much in any regard. And I've just noticed that like, I'll get down about like, I stumbled on someone the other day and of course she's fabulous and has a podcast that's super successful and like had 456,000 followers. I remember that number. And I was like, wow, you know, and I started to get kind of down on myself.
Yeah.
And then I just really got curious and I started asking myself those questions like, what is that feeling that you would have if you had that? Mm-hmm. How can I, you know, understand more of what I'm desiring in that feeling rather than this exterior version of the follower number, you know, and like your bank account number could be the exact same thing. Like, what is that you're seeking, or on TikTok in that comparison? Yeah. Just asking those curious questions. And that's more of that consciousness you were mentioning.
Right. And like, I think that's such a great question to ask, is like asking the question of how can I embody what I want to embody with like what I already have, or how can I like get the feeling that I'm searching for with what I already have?
Because I know that I am actually happy.
Yeah, right.
Like I am in a wonderful relationship and my kids are healthy and like, you know, like I am happy. Yeah. So I'm like, what in me is seeking something, you know?
Yeah,
like,
I know. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's like just recognizing like on social media, it's like, whenever you see someone that you're following on social media, and to your point, you kind of get that like twinge or like just that ooh, you know what I mean?
Like
that feeling.
It's this I'm not good enough thing, you know?
Yeah.
Like really.
And it just brings up a lot of feelings of like lack and that sort of thing.
Not enoughness,
right? It's kind of getting to like, okay, what ultimately, like what's the feeling and the emotion that I'm trying to get to?
Exactly.
And I think it's like desire and jealousy, like a common question that I get a lot is like how to stop like comparing, like how do we stop comparing ourselves to others? And I always say like, I think that's pretty impossible to do. I think it's pretty impossible to like,
let's be real here.
Like, I'm just like, listen, like you're gonna do it. It's just how our brains are wired to work. Our brains are literally wired from a survival standpoint to always compare our set of resources to another person's set of resources. And now with social media, we can do that to a whole new level, right? So I'm like, listen, I don't think that like asking yourself the question of how do we stop comparing is the right question to ask. I think it's how can I use comparison constructively
to serve me
versus destructively that a lot of people do. But it's just like your brain's just going to go there. Your brain's going to go to the comparison. Your brain's going to go to the jealousy. And I always say, don't be hard on yourself for feeling jealous. Jealous is, I think jealousy is a really like misunderstood emotion, because it's just been painted in society as like, especially with women, it's like super evil and unbecoming and, oh, don't be jealous. But to me, I'm like, I think if you see someone and you feel that like ping of jealousy, it's almost kind of like the universe's way of trying to tell you like, or like reveal a desire to you.
Big time. I recognized that many years ago. And
Yeah.
I was like, oh, when I feel that that's an indicator of something that I'm really desiring.
Yes.
And like, that can be a good thing. Now I'm shown that. Add it
Yeah.
to your to buy list or whatever.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But I would say like, don't use the comparison or the jealousy against yourself, meaning like, don't beat yourself up for feeling jealous. A lot of my clients do that. Like I just coached someone, she's like, I'm so jealous of this other woman, and I'm so ashamed that I feel so jealous of her. And I'm like,
I think that's common.
Drop the shame around the jealousy. Like it's okay to be jealous. It's okay to see something someone else has and be like, I would like that for myself too. Right? Like there's nothing wrong with that. But what we don't need to do is like feel the jealousy and then pile on shame and judgment on top of the jealousy because we feel jealous. It's like,
Right.
just feel jealous. Just feel the jealousy. Let it reveal to you what it's meant to reveal to you. Take from that what you will and move on.
You know, maybe there's an element of like you move toward, once you feel that, you go, oh, well, I can celebrate what I actually want, you know?
Yes.
Like, and then you are actually maybe starting to celebrate that person.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
know?
And like exactly what we were talking about before, just take that note, kind of factor it into future you, right?
Yeah.
Like, okay, like future Paige or future Amy in the future, like she does this, she has this, she has these types of habits and routines, right? And then like work yourself to that rather than focusing on, it's not something that I have right now, right? Because when you're constantly focused on, I call it like clean wanting versus dirty wanting, clean pain versus dirty pain, like, or clean desire versus dirty desire. It's like a clean desire is having a desire for something and knowing that like it can be yours.
Yes.
It's not like being withheld from you. It's not something that you can't have. It just might be something that's like not meant for you right now in this moment versus the dirty desire, which is desiring something that you have a inherent belief that isn't for you and that you can't have.
I love that.
That's the dirty type of desire that feels awful, terrible, right? Like that's the worst.
I started thinking of that in sexual terms too. Like, but you know what? You
I
can
know.
take something that you consider dirty because that means that it's like something you have to hide. And
Yeah.
rather you can turn that into something beautiful that
Yeah.
you can have, that you can do,
Right.
you know, like.
Yeah, dirty, muddy, destructive, like whatever
Yeah,
you want to
destructive,
call
I
it,
like that.
right? Like,
yeah.
like productive desire versus destructive desire. But when you desire something like that you see someone else has and your first inherent thought is like, I can't have that. I'm not meant for that. I'm not
Right.
worthy
Right.
enough to have that. That's the destructive desire because it's like desiring something that in your heart of hearts you believe like you'll never be able to have and you'll
Yeah.
never be able to create, or it's something that's not meant for you.
Right.
Versus like seeing something and you're like, wow, like I love how she does that, or I love this, or I love that. Like, and knowing that like if it's something that you want, it is meant for you, right?
I
And
love that.
It may not come to you right now, but it will eventually.
Yeah. So relax.
Exactly. Cool off. Chill
Relax
out.
already. All right. Well, I'm going to wrap this up because
I
we're
know.
like going
This
into
flew
2 hours
by.
time.
I
It
know.
really did. I
Yeah.
really loved talking to you.
Yeah.
I mean, like, wow.
There's so much to cover. Honestly, I could have
Really?
kept talking to you for like probably another 4 hours. And it would have
know.
seemed like 45 minutes. But
Well, then when you think of things, when you listen back to this and think of things that you wanted to talk about, next time you come to Austin, you have an open door. Because I
Yeah,
really
totally.
enjoyed this and I would love to talk about it more.
Yeah, totally.
So, and I feel like I had a list of things too that we kind of didn't get to. So that said, is there anything that we didn't get to that you really wanted to talk about today, or anything that's come up that maybe you want to just end with?
gosh, we honestly covered so much.
We
so
really
I feel
did.
like, yeah, but
And
I
thank
think,
you.
I think if you're going to
love
take
it.
one thing from this episode, it's remembering that it's my tagline, right? Like spending is a skill. Spending isn't who you are. It's something that you do. So if this is something that you're really struggling with, like doing the work to really like detach it from your identity of you're not a shopper. Shopping is just something that you do. And you're not a spender. Spending is just something that you do. And it's something that you can get better at over time. And
I mean, that's a
just
really
think about it that way.
just a fundamental reframe.
Yeah.
Like of the stories that we're telling ourselves
Totally.
or old stories that we've been told, and letting go of all this other stuff
Yeah.
and just understanding none of this is who I am.
Yeah. And I'll say this I'll offer this to everyone. One thought that I love to have about myself, and it's a part of my self-concept, is I love spending money and I love saving money. Like, I'm a really good spender and I'm a really good saver.
I love it.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
it's just kind of like the balance between those two. Like, I'm not one or the other. I'm really good at both. I'm really good at spending and I'm really good at saving. I do them both really, really well. Right?
Yeah.
And that hasn't always been the case. Right? And I don't get it perfect, but it's just, that's something that's become a part of my like self-concept. So yeah, it can for yours too.
It can for yours too.
Yeah.
What are your other practices like? I'm wondering about like your, spiritual side, or, your, what do you like otherwise?
So I journal a lot. I think, for me, in terms of just money, we talked about this, checking in with my money every day. I journal quite a bit. I would say like not every day, but I would say at least like a couple times a week. And I mean, I think like when it comes to spending money, like I think spending money in and of itself, like, is a form of practice, right? Like it almost is like this spiritual exchange, right? And so it's like, I love just like when I spend money, and even when I receive money, like anytime money comes in or anytime money comes out, always like greeting the money and thanking it, right? Like one thing I do, like anytime I get any sort of money, whether it's, like someone pays me to join my program, or even if like the other day we had an insurance company that sent us like a refund check that was for like $5 or something like that. Anytime any money comes to me, I always like greet it, and I always say like, thank you. I'm always like, thank you. Like kind of just like thanking the money for coming in, like thanking it for being there, almost like building up that trust that like the money is always going to come in, and then also building up that trust in myself that like I'm always going to manage it well going out the other end, right? And so it's like, even when I'm spending the money, it's almost kind of like sending it away and being like, okay, like now this money is flowing away from me to someone else to like serve a different purpose.
Total, which
right?
it is. Big time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would say that those are kind of like my favorite quick ones.
I love it.
So, and I feel like I've get like, start your things I want to buy list. That one's big. I feel like I'm forgetting one. We talked about so much. I'm like, what was the other one? I can't think of it, but yeah.
How much more peace do you feel personally in your life having this system in place and having peace around money than you did from that 22-year-old self that spent her entire...
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to even like put it into words. Like it's hard to even like describe like that increased level of peace. And I always say like the older I've gotten, like shifting from 22-year-old me to, 34-year-old me, money, I used to have a very one-sided relationship with money, meaning money was only as good to me as what it would get me. And what it would buy me, right? And it was very like, what can you do for me, money? What can you buy me? What can you get me? And obviously that was very reflective in the type of relationship that I had with money. And money was all about the stuff. And now money to me is all about a feeling. Like money to me, like the stuff is great. And I it's like, I'm not going to say like, I don't like having stuff. Like there's, of course, like stuff is just a part of the world we live in, right? Like we're all going to have stuff, but money to me now is so much more about a feeling. And I'll leave everyone with this. This is another concept that I love to teach of, for those of us who love to shop and love to spend, I love this reframe of every single dollar that like comes into you, you get to go shopping with. It's like the question becomes, what do I want to buy with this $1? Do I want to buy something tangible, and do I want to spend it? And is it going to flow away from me to someone else? So am I going to buy a product, a service, or an experience that's going to get me something tangible? But also, when you choose not to spend money and when you choose to save it and have it, you are also buying yourself something. You're just buying yourself something intangible. You're buying yourself peace of mind, security, time freedom, options down the road. And so it's like you get to shop with every single dollar that you have. So the question becomes like, do I want to buy something tangible or do I want to buy something intangible? And I think that's just this like battle that we have. Like we view saving as the enemy of spending, right? And really they're complements to each other. Like they're two beautiful complements to each other of like, I'm going to get to buy something. Do I want to buy something tangible or do I want to buy myself something intangible? But they don't have to be these two things that are constantly like fighting against each other.
Yeah, which is this peace of mind and this peace.
But I mean, just so much peace of mind. I mean, and like I said, money is so much more to me about a feeling. And, you know, I always say like the highs and the rushes and, you know, it's like I can so clearly remember like how I felt like buying all of those things. And it felt great. Like, I'm not gonna lie, it was super fun and it felt great while I was doing it. And like, I would love like looking at my closet and like seeing all my clothes, but like nothing that doesn't even come close to what I have now, which is just the financial like peace and security that I have. There's nothing that touches it. It doesn't even come close.
We went through this whole conversation. You didn't say the word abundance once.
Really?
Yeah.
Abundance is a word that I try. I feel like it's kind of turned into this, like, this is my personal take on it. This like trendy
I already
word.
know what you're going to say. Yes.
So I try not to use it a lot. I actually like the term like sufficiency.
Okay.
Just like enoughness and sufficiency. I say those words a lot. So if you listen to my podcast or if you like absorb any of my coachings, you'll hear me say the words sufficiency and enoughness a lot. I don't say abundance a lot because I feel like
I thought it was funny.
I feel like it's turned into this like I don't know, this kind of like trendy word. Right?
It totally has.
And I think people misconstrue, and I think people use it against themselves, like what you were saying, like, oh, I want to be in abundance. Let me go out and buy a Porsche that I can't afford. I'm like, that's actually not abundance. That's the opposite of abundance, but okay.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I try not to use it too much, but.
Well, perfect segue. How can everyone find you and listen to your podcast?
Yeah. Okay. So I have a podcast of my own. So obviously you're a podcast person. And if you want to add a good money podcast into your lineup, my podcast is called The Money Love Podcast. It's on Apple, Spotify, all the places.
I'll have a link in the show notes.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
On social, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, you can search overcoming_overspending. That's my handle on all social platforms. And if you're wanting to kind of just like take this work deeper, like if you're like, yes, this is an area that I absolutely need some help in, I have a membership. It's called Overcoming Overspending. I say, kind of think of it of like, it's kind of like a gym membership, but for your money.
Cool.
But we really focus on this outflow piece of money, right? So we focus on once you get the money, what do you do with it and how do you spend it?
I love it.
Managing it, having it, saving it, and then spending it, that's kind of the realm that we focus on. So if you're kind of what we talked about, if you're like, I make good money, it's not an income problem that I'm having. It's not the inflow, it's the outflow that's the issue. I'm definitely your girl to help you with that.
Cool.
So, overcomingoverspending.com.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yes, good. Everything is going to be in the show notes. And I can't thank you enough.
Yeah,
this was great. It
so
was
fun.
so much longer than we expected. And I'm thrilled. I love when that happens.
Me too.
Yes.
It flew by.
So it really did. And I can't thank you enough.
Yeah.
So, and to get to do it in person was extra special.
Amazing.
Yay.
Amazing. I loved it.
Thank you
for
so
having
much.
me on, Amy.
Oh my
So
gosh.
fun.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for being here. Chances are you heard something that made you think of someone else. I say share it with a friend. That's where the magic happens. We start discussions. We start consciousness around whatever it is that we're focused on, right? If something is coming up for you, get conscious about it. That's precisely what we're talking about here. And the more we can do that with every aspect in our life, the more we're elevating into that highest, best version of us, of which there is no limit, as you know, I like to say. So thank you so much for being here. Check out Paige. Everything's in the show notes, and her podcast too, which, I mean, that's just free coaching right there. So go check it out. Thank you for being here. Again, share and sign up for my newsletter. It's at amyedwards.info is basically everything that you could want. And it's also my link in bio. So, and follow me on Real Amy Edwards on Instagram, The Magic Babe on TikTok. I love you so much. Thank you for being here. Till next time.
This has been the Amy Edwards Show from Overcome Studios. Remember to rate, review, and subscribe. And thank you so much for being here. Sign up for our newsletter at amyedwards.com.